Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a complex topic, synthesize all the relevant information, and basically hand you the shortcut to being instantly well-informed.
Uh-huh.
Today, we are pointing the compass east specifically to one of the most, well, mythologized places on Earth, Bali.
The island of the gods.
Instagram's perpetual darling, yeah, and perhaps the world's most famous vacation destination.
It really is. And it's kind of the ultimate test case, isn't it, for mass tourism on a relatively small island.
Definitely.
The central question we are tackling today seems straightforward, but its answer is incredibly complex and nuanced, especially for the modern traveler thinking about going now in 2026.
Which is?
Has Bali actually maintained its profound, spiritual magic, or is it now just overhyped and maybe completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of crowds and commercialization?
Exactly. That's the core of it. Our mission today is to cut through the usual travelogue cliches, the perfect photos, and find the real Bali experience today. What's it actually like on the ground? We've synthesized a fantastic stack of sources for you. Recent travel surveys, digging into visitor feelings, hard-hitting tourism impact reports, looking at the strain on infrastructure.
Which is critical.
And, crucially, local interviews that give us the pulse of the community, the people dealing with this pressure every single day. We're looking at crowds, costs, and culture.
And importantly, where you might still find some relief from, well, the chaos.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's find out what that trip truly feels like moment by moment.
So, when people first dream of Bali, they usually picture those iconic rice paddies, quiet temples.
Yeah, total serenity.
Right, an immediate sense of calm just washing over them the second they step off the plane. But the reality starts much, much sooner. Right at the airport curb, actually.
And it begins with a number, a really big number.
A colossal number.
It does. Our sources confirm a scale of recovery post-global events that is, frankly, staggering. Bali has seen this dramatic, sustained surge in international visitor numbers.
Okay, what's the figure?
To give you the specific data point we've got, 6.5 million international visitors arrived last year alone.
Wow, 6.5 million.
That number is the baseline, really, for everything that follows on the island experience.
And that figure, 6.5 million, it needs immediate context.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't just represent, hotel bookings or tourist dollars.
No.
It represents a significant, immediate, and continuous strain on the island's actual infrastructure.
Yeah.
We have to think about what that volume means for daily life.
Like what specifically?
Well, it means huge demand for clean water, for electricity, and perhaps most urgently, the management of municipal waste. All that rubbish has to go somewhere.
That's a huge logistical challenge.
Think about it this way. This is an island trying to absorb the equivalent of the entire population of, say, Denmark arriving every single year.
Okay, that puts the logistics into really harsh perspective. I mean, Ngururai Airport is a busy, major international hub, sure, but once you leave that air-conditioned arrival hall...
Right, then you're immediately confronted by the consequences of that density.
So what's that first hit like?
The immediate sensation upon landing is still, that tropical humidity. And yes, there's definitely a wave of excitement. People are thrilled to be there.
Right.
But it's quickly followed by a reality check.
Mm-hmm.
You get the crowds navigating the exit, trying to find their drivers or taxis. You get the undeniable perpetual bustle of Denpasar spilling outwards.
And the traffic.
At the bottleneck. It's caused by the sheer volume of vehicles needed to move all those millions of people to their hotels, their villas, wherever they're staying. The unavoidable traffic jams are, for many people, the very first defining characteristic of their Balinese experience.
It really is the new initial challenge, isn't it? Just the sheer weight of humanity trying to move around.
It is.
And I want to push on that congestion point because the sources describe the ride from the airport, even just the, 13 kilometers into Seminyak?
You're not far on paper.
Often taking over an hour and a half during peak times, sometimes longer. This is absolutely not the quiet, idyllic, frangipani-scented ride people might be imagining.
It is not. And what's fascinating here, or maybe frustrating, is the tension. Does this intense, congested first impression, the slow, hot movement in traffic, the sheer volume of people, does it immediately overwhelm that welcoming spiritual vibe Bali is historically known for?
Or does the excitement win out?
Or is the profound excitement of finally being in Bali powerful enough to overcome those early, sometimes really frustrating hurdles? For many, it seems to set up a kind of cognitive dissonance right away.
Yeah, you've got this image, and then there's the reality hitting you. It demands an immediate adjustment in expectations from the traveler, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If you arrive expecting immediate, quiet solitude, you're going to be disappointed, perhaps even quite frustrated before you've even checked in.
So the advice is,
The sources suggest the best approach is really to arrive prepared for the energy, for the crowds, maybe viewed as the vibrancy of a major, popular travel destination rather than an instant escape.
because that 6.5 million visitor number, it's like the ghost in the room, isn't it?
It is. It's the foundation of pretty much every subsequent experience you'll have on the island. It shapes where you go, what you pay, and definitely how fast you can get there.
And we should also mention, this congestion isn't just about slowing down your vacation time.
No, not at all. It has a profound impact on local life, too. Think about the local workers, the Balinese people, who have to navigate this same traffic every single day.
Right, just getting to their jobs.
Exactly. Turning what should be a short commute into this monumental logistical challenge just to get to their jobs, often serving the very tourism industry, causing the congestion. It's an immediate high-pressure environment right from the moment you step off the plane.
So the key takeaway from that first arrival segment seems to be lower your expectation of speed upon arrival. Drastic.
Definitely. And maybe even if you can, plan your transfer during off-peak hours if preserving that initial sense of calm is really important to you, though off-peak is becoming harder to define. Okay, so once you successfully navigate that initial congestion, you finally get to the places everyone actually flies halfway across the world to see.
The postcard spots.
Exactly. And it absolutely must be stressed. Bali's established highlights are highlights for a reason. They remain profoundly beautiful. They still deliver that scenic promise.
Absolutely. We're talking about places like the breathtaking sea cliffs of Uluwatu, still a classic draw, still offers incredible views, especially, at sunset.
Gospel.
Or the serene, organized artistry of the Tagalalong rice terraces near Ubud. I mean, the skill involved, the serenity in just looking at them, the layers of green, that visual payoff is truly timeless.
It really is. These are the places that genuinely deliver on the aesthetic promise of Bali. The pictures don't always lie.
And then there's Ubud, the cultural heartland, supposedly.
Ah, Ubud. Our sources describe Ubud as having, and this is a direct quote, definitely kept its soul, which is actually a huge relief, I think, for people who remember its more traditional, quieter past.
Okay, but how exactly do the sources measure that remaining soul? Because it sounds like it's fighting against some pretty overwhelming commercial pressure.
It is. The descriptor we have is that Ubud is now characterized by a very, very high concentration of yoga retreats, specialized breathwork classes, sound healing centers, and gourmet vegan cafes.
So the soul is where exactly?
The soul arguably remains in the temples that are still active and central to local life there, in the surrounding rice paddies once you get away from the main streets, and definitely in the artistry. The woodcarvers, the painters who are still operating, often in workshops just outside the town center.
But the center itself?
But the center of town, it's almost pure commerce geared towards wellness tourism now. It is, to borrow that perfect phrase from the source material, eat, pray, love with a modern twist.
Right. So it's spirituality, but packaged and sold.
It's the high-end commercialization of spirituality, precisely. People are seeking deeper meaning, which is great, but they're often paying significantly higher prices for specialized, branded wellness experiences.
And doing it shoulder to shoulder with thousands of others on the same quest.
Exactly. It's communal searching, but on a mass scale.
So the authenticity is still there in Ubud, but you have to consciously peel back the layers of boutique shops and the packaged yoga retreats to actually find it.
You do. It requires a bit more effort now.
Okay, now moving away from Ubud down to the coast. The sources show the beaches have really taken on very distinct personalities, which sounds vital for you, the traveler, choosing where to base yourself. You need the right vibe.
Precisely. You can't just assume all Bali beaches are the same anymore. If you're looking for, say, high-end dining luxury boutiques, maybe a slightly older, more refined crowd, then Seminyak is characterized as chic.
Chic. Okay. Polished.
Yeah, polished, established, and definitely expensive compared to other areas. Now contrast that with Canggu, which has just exploded in popularity over the last decade.
What's the vibe there?
It's generally known as laid back, but that really translates to bohemian, highly social, and driven by a younger crowd, lots of surfers, and especially digital nomads.
Right. The laptop brigade.
That's the place for cheap scooter rentals, smoothie bowls, co-working spaces, and endless artisanal coffee shops. Very different energy to Seminyak.
So the days of every beach just being, sand and waves are long gone. You have to actively choose your Bali experience before you even land, or you risk being in a place that just doesn't match your energy or budget.
Completely. Mismatching your location to your expectations is a recipe for disappointment.
But, okay, for the traveler who genuinely wants to escape the noise, escape the commercialization of those primary areas like Canggu and Seminyak, the source material does offer some very specific recommendations. The search for quiet is still possible, right?
Yes, absolutely. And these are the nuggets that are golden for our listener, I think. The sources detail specific hidden gems that definitely require more effort, maybe a bit of a trek, but they deliver that relative isolation.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting then, because these are the places you probably need to write down if you want genuine isolation or a glimpse of something less processed.
Go on.
For a quieter beach experience, apparently requiring a slightly tricky trek down some cliffs, which is key, the sources specifically recommend Nyang Nyang Beach.
Ah, yes, down on the Bukit Peninsula.
Exactly. It's noted for its relatively untouched state, cleaner sand, precisely because the access is demanding. That barrier to entry, that little bit of difficulty, filters out the vast majority of mass tourism.
That's often the trade-off, isn't it? Effort equals reward.
Seems so. And if you are chasing those mesmerizing natural landscapes, maybe away from the coast?
Well, the Tukatsepong waterfall is highlighted as exactly that mesmerizing. It's famous for those incredible shafts of light that pierce down through the opening of the cave it's hidden within. Very photogenic, but still requires some navigating.
And getting to these spots often means going deeper inland, maybe hiring a local guide.
Usually, yes, which again acts as a sort of built-in barrier, protecting them from that instant mass tourist flow you see at easier-to-reach places.
But perhaps the most profound recommendation in the sources for finding authentic community life, not just scenery, is Penglipuran Village.
Ah, Penglipuran.
Our sources describe this as a genuinely preserved example of traditional Balinese life that has actively resisted some of the more aggressive aspects of modernization and tourism development.
It's fascinating. This village operates under very strict customary rules, known locally as adat.
Right.
Ancient rituals aren't just, preserved like museum pieces. They are alive, and they actually govern daily life. That includes the traditional architecture, all the houses look similar, and the community layout itself.
And crucially,
The sources note that it maintains relatively few tourists wandering through compared to Ubud, say. And perhaps most tellingly, the notable absence of taxis, ride shares, and large-scale commercial accommodation within the village boundaries.
wow. So that absence of the typical tourist infrastructure, the things we almost take for granted everywhere else in Bali, that signals that Penglipuran offers a really valuable, transparent window into how life operates when it's not primarily oriented towards the transient visitor.
Precisely. It underlines the fact that Bali is vast, The iconic spots like Kuta or Seminyak are just one tiny, albeit loud, part of the whole story.
So you have to deliberately seek out the other, more resilient, perhaps quieter parts of the island, if that's what you're after.
The rule seems pretty simple, based on the sources. The harder it is to get to, generally, the more authentic the experience remains. Makes sense, really.
Okay, so we've talked about the sheer volume of visitors, that 6.5 million number. Logically, that could easily just erase local culture, right? Just pave over it.
You'd think so. But one of Bali's most enduring strengths, and maybe its saving grace, is how completely the culture still saturates daily life. Well, this isn't like a museum exhibit or some kind of theme park where culture is performed on schedule. This is a living, breathing, spiritual landscape where Balinese Hinduism is absolutely central to everything.
And you can't really avoid it, even if you tried.
That's the real magic, I think. You actually can't escape the culture, even if you're staying in a super high-end resort in one of the main tourist bubbles. It permeates the whole sensory experience of the island.
Give us some specifics. What does the visitor actually see and hear day to day that reinforces this spiritual core you're talking about?
Okay, well, you see the Kanang sari everywhere. Those are the small, beautiful palm leaf baskets filled with flowers, maybe some rice, incense.
The offerings.
Exactly. Placed out fresh every single dawn on basically every doorstep, sidewalk, car dashboard, little shrines, everywhere. It's constant.
What else?
You hear the rhythmic sounds of gamelan music, those unique, intricate percussion ensembles. It just carries on the air, maybe signaling a practice session or preparation for a temple ceremony, an odalan. And you witness the incredibly colorful religious ceremonies. The processions that frequently and sometimes quite spontaneously just burst onto the main streets, briefly halting all the scooter traffic.
So it's not put on for tourists.
No, this is core Balinese Hinduism in action, happening right in front of you, the traveler. It's not merely performed for tourists, it's happening anyway, and tourists happen to be there.
This persistence of ritual, it raises a really critical point about the local voice, the Balinese perspective on all this. The sources bring in the perspective of a local artist, a man named Ketut.
Yes, and his message is really powerful. It basically serves as a direct instruction to the visitor, to you if you're listening and planning a trip.
What does he say?
He says the local community is generally willing to share Bali's beauty. They understand the economic necessity, but they are absolutely adamant about protecting their spiritual essence. It's non-negotiable.
And how are tourists viewed in that context?
Tourists are viewed not primarily as paying customers who are entitled to the island.
Right, which is a common tourist mindset sometimes.
Exactly. But rather, they are viewed as guests. And crucially, as guests, they are asked, sometimes even demanded, to respect local customs, sacred sites like temples, and the land itself.
That makes complete sense. But does the source material address how the local government or maybe community groups are actually enforcing that respect? Is it just a moral appeal, or are there, genuine penalties or boundaries for disrespect?
It's definitely both. The sources point to increased awareness campaigns from the tourism board, things like signs about proper attire at temples, and yes, stricter penalties for acts of extreme disrespect. We've all seen those news stories about tourists behaving badly at sacred sites, like posing naked or climbing on things they shouldn't.
Yeah, those go viral, unfortunately.
They do. But perhaps more significantly, the pressure is often applied socially, at the community level. Local Balinese communities have a very strong capacity for self-governance through the Banjar system and for maintaining those boundaries themselves.
How does that work in practice?
Well, sometimes it's just the refusal of locals to engage with or assist travelers who display blatant disrespect. That social disapproval can be a powerful deterrent. It really underscores that fundamental cultural contract. You are a guest in what they consider a deeply spiritual home. Act accordingly.
That tension, the idea that the land and the ceremonies are sacred first and tourist attractions second, that seems key to understanding why issues like disrespect in temples or on sacred ground become so quickly controversial and why the local response can be so forceful.
Absolutely. It's not just about breaking a rule, it's seen as a deep offense against the spiritual balance of the island. Now, interestingly, this very cultural authenticity is actually a unique selling point for a specific subset of visitors,
Yeah.
the long-stay residents.
You mean the expats, the digital nomads?
Exactly. The sources indicate that digital nomads and other long-term travelers, people staying for months or even years, specifically cite that sense of community as being central to their experience, something that makes Bali special for them.
That's a critical distinction, isn't it? They don't just want a pretty backdrop for their Zoom calls. They are actively seeking some kind of integration into that community structure they perceive.
That seems to be the case for many, yes.
So how does the robust, interconnected nature of Balinese life, the Banjar system you mentioned, how does that actually help make a long stay feel unique compared to, say, just renting an apartment long-term in a typical Western city?
Well, because in Bali, the community structure, the Banjar, is so deeply embedded in governance and social life at a very local level. Long-stay residents often find they're not just renting a villa in isolation.
They're part of something.
They are surrounded by a functioning traditional community unit. The Banjar organizes ceremonies, maintains local infrastructure like paths or meeting halls, provides a social safety net for its members. It creates a web of connection.
Which contrasts sharply
With the anonymity often found in purely transitory destinations or large cities, it seems to provide a sense of belonging and rootedness, even for foreigners, that transcends a typical vacation experience.
So fascinatingly, the deepest element of Balinese life, its traditional community structure, is actually what draws in the people who decide to stay the longest.
It appears so.
But here, surely, is where we hit a massive paradox, a contradiction that we really need to explore fully in the next segment.
Go on.
Because these long-stay visitors, the ones seeking this authentic community, aren't they simultaneously contributing significantly to the island's profound economic and structural strain?
Yes. That is the central, unavoidable tension of modern Bali. Sharing beauty is, for many, a commercial necessity. Demanding respect and protecting their essence is a spiritual and cultural necessity.
And the financial impacts.
And the financial impacts are where that tension really explodes. That's where it gets very complicated.
Right. We've talked about the crowds, we've talked about the culture. Now let's talk dollars and cents, or maybe rupiah, and the increasingly heavy environmental cost of this mass movement of people. The rising price of paradise is a very real factor for travelers in 2026. It forces a real discussion about the actual value proposition.
Yeah, definitely. And the food scene, I think, perfectly illustrates this dichotomy of cost and culture playing out.
How so?
Well, on one end of the spectrum, you absolutely still have the truly local, resilient warangs. These are the small, often family-run eateries serving affordable, authentic dishes like nasi campur or bubi goreng.
The mixed rice plates, the roast suckling pig.
Yeah.
Yummy.
Exactly. They still exist, thankfully, and they are absolutely essential for budget travelers and for experiencing genuine local food. But
They're being overshadowed.
increasingly, yes, they're being overshadowed by the sheer proliferation of gourmet options, especially those catering to the wellness and luxury crowds we talked about in Ubud, but also in Canggu and Seminyak.
Like the high-end vegan places?
Like the high-end, often imported ingredient vegan and raw food restaurants, the fancy brunch spots, the cocktail bars, and the sources confirm that general costs across the board in these areas have indeed crept up significantly.
Is this just global inflation, or is it specific to Bali?
It feels like more than just general global inflation. It's very location-specific inflation, driven by extreme demand, especially from foreigners with stronger currencies.
Got an example.
Sources specifically note that dinner out in hotspots like Canggu now feels, and this is the code again, more Sydney than Southeast Asia.
Wow. That's a potent comparison. Sydney is not known for being cheap.
Not at all. It means if you dine and socialize primarily in the trendiest areas where the digital nomads and the long-term vacationers tend to congregate, you're very often paying Western prices.
For imported wines, maybe certain foods.
For imported goods, luxury ingredients, high-end service, the whole package, it's a different economic reality within those bubbles.
And presumably, this cost inflation affects local life too, right? It's not just tourists paying more for lattes.
Oh, absolutely. Even if a local person never sets foot in the gourmet vegan cafe, they are still paying inflated prices for basic necessities like gasoline, maybe certain construction materials, rent. Because the overall cost of living in those desirable areas has been pushed way up by foreign money and demand.
Okay, and nightlife, does that reflect this split too?
Completely. It reflects this wide spectrum, often dictated by price point and target audience. You can still find the loud, maybe slightly chaotic experience of Kuta. The sources describe it as neon chaos. It's still there, a kind of budget-friendly, young party scene.
Right.
Or, at the other end, you can seek out the much quieter sophistication of Ubud's jazz cafes, or Seminak's upscale beach clubs and fine dining bars, which cater to a completely different and wealthier demographic.
So again, the traveler has to decide which price point and decibel level they prefer.
Pretty much. And increasingly, it feels like those two worlds, the budget Kuta world and the pricey Seminyak Canggu world, they don't really mix much anymore. They coexist, but separately.
But the really critical discussion here, the elephant in the room perhaps, is about the broader consequences of overtourism. The heavy price the island itself is paying for this dramatic recovery and sustained popularity.
Yeah, this is where it gets quite sobering. The problems listed in the sources are the familiar, almost agonizing hallmarks of overdevelopment concentrated on a relatively small, ecologically sensitive landmass.
Such as?
We're talking about rapidly rising property prices, making it hard for locals to buy homes. We're talking packed roads that turn short distances into agonizingly long commutes, affecting everyone. General environmental strain waste management, water pollution, reef damage.
Then just pressure on daily life.
And an increased, palpable pressure on local life that affects everything from reliable access to utilities like water and power, right through to cultural preservation efforts being potentially swamped.
Okay, this is where that digital nomad factor comes into really sharp relief, forcing us to confront that paradox we mentioned earlier.
Yes. Our sources point out the specific economic tension created by these long-stay visitors, even the ones who genuinely love Bali.
What's the mechanism? How does it work?
The mechanism is quite simple, but the impact can be devastating locally. Digital nomads, expats, and foreign investors are often booking or buying villas and long-term accommodation instead of staying in traditional government-regulated hotels.
Okay.
They're using this housing stock, which could otherwise be for locals, for their own medium-term residency or turning it into short-term rentals like Airbnbs. This activity competes directly with local housing needs.
And drives up prices.
And crucially, it drives up land value and rental costs exponentially, especially in desirable areas. This leads directly to gentrification in places like Seminyak and especially Canggu,
Pushing locals out.
pushing local workers and traditional families further and further away from the coastal areas where many of them need to live to work in the tourism sector that serves the foreigners.
So the very people seeking the authentic community are, however, unintentionally, simultaneously contributing to the displacement or the economic strain on the locals who actually form that community.
The irony is excruciating, isn't it? In a way, they risk pricing out the very culture they came to experience.
Wow. Okay, so in response to this overwhelming environmental and social strain, what's being done? Is there a push for sustainability?
Yes, thankfully. The push for sustainability has definitely moved from being a sort of niche concern among a few eco-lodges to being an urgent, critical necessity that's being discussed more widely.
What specific efforts are the sources highlighting in this area? We need tangible examples, not just good intentions. What about that waste problem, for instance?
Okay, well, we are seeing the rise of more formalized eco-resorts, places genuinely focusing on zero-waste principles, rainwater harvesting, local sourcing for their restaurants. That's one positive trend.
What else?
We also see vibrant, often grassroots, plastic-free movements across the island. These are community efforts, sometimes driven by expats and locals working together, organizing beach cleanups, trying to manage waste independently because the municipal services are often overwhelmed.
And preservation.
And there are definitely dedicated temple preservation efforts and coastal conservation projects trying to protect reefs or prevent erosion, often funded partly by tourism levies or private conservation groups.
These are all crucial, necessary responses, obviously. However, the source material also adds a necessary constraint, a reality check that stops us from being overly optimistic.
Which is?
Real structural change is slow, painfully slow sometimes, and it explicitly requires every single visitor, every one of those 6.5 million people, to actually pitch in.
Yeah, this isn't something the government or a few eco-resorts can solve on their own. It demands a fundamental shift in traveler behavior. It's down to individual responsibility.
Meaning what in practice?
It means actively avoiding single-use plastics, bring your own water bottle, say no to straws. It means being conscious of your water and electricity consumption in your hotel or villa. It means respecting the local waste disposal system, not just dumping rubbish anywhere.
So it connects directly back to that cultural contract of respect we talked about earlier with Katut, the artist.
Absolutely. It's not just about respecting ceremonies or dressing properly at temples. It's about respecting the physical viability of the island itself, ensuring it can actually sustain this level of attention.
Okay, we have laid out the costs, the crowds, the environmental strain, but also the enduring magic, the culture, the landscapes. Now we need to synthesize this, bring it all together into that core question. Is Bali still worth it in 2026 for you, the savvy, informed traveler?
It's the big question. We can try and break it down into a sort of clear list of pros and cons, derived directly from the collective experience reflected in the sources.
Let's do it. The pros first. What remains undeniably magical?
Okay, pros. The timeless landscapes. That hasn't changed. The volcanic peaks, the hidden waterfalls we mentioned, the terraced rice fields, they're still breathtaking. Also, the deep, pervasive art scene, the crafts, the dance, the music, and fundamentally that enduring spirituality that is so uniquely woven into daily Balinese life.
Those core aspects still define the island's identity.
They absolutely do. They are the bedrock.
But the detractors, the cons, are significant now and have to be weighed really heavily in the balance.
They do. The cons are undeniable. Overtourism in specific, very popular areas. The high costs, concentrated in those hotspots like Canggu, Seminyak, parts of Ubud. And the genuine struggle the average, perhaps unprepared traveler now faces to find that promised authenticity without putting in a lot of deliberate effort.
So the magic is still there.
The magic is still there, but you increasingly have to actively fight the commercial tide, get off the beaten path, to really reach it consistently.
And the traveler voices that were surveyed, the anecdotal evidence from the sources, they really underscore this divided perspective, don't they?
Sharply split. It perfectly reflects the fact that there are almost two different Balis coexisting today. The authentic, maybe more rural or harder to reach Bali, and the hyper-commercialized, Instagram-famous coastal Bali.
Give us some examples of those voices.
Okay, first, the positive adventure seeker view, which validates seeking out those hidden gems we discussed.
Yeah.
One traveler is quoted saying, "It's still worth it for nature if you get off the beaten track." The second you leave the main circuit, they said, the costs drop and the genuine smiles return.
Okay, so effort rewarded. Then the critical view.
Then we have the critical, maybe slightly disillusioned view, reflecting that painful truth of gentrification and cost increase. Another traveler said, Canggu is just like Bondi in Sydney now. Crowds, hipster cafes, and inflated prices. If you want cheap Southeast Asia, this isn't it anymore.
Ouch, that's pretty blunt. That traveler clearly experienced the bubble.
They did. And finally, perhaps the most insightful quote focuses on immersion, giving us the clearest path to finding that authenticity.
Which is?
Volunteering in rural Bali showed me the island's real side. It required engaging with the local community, not just consuming their services.
Right. That quote tells you everything, doesn't it? The real Bali, the deeper experience, it requires engagement, contribution, effort, not just passive consumption of scenery and services.
Yeah, precisely. Now, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the question becomes, what if the downsides of Bali, the traffic, the costs, the crowds, the feeling of being overwhelmed, what if they simply outweigh the pros for you personally?
Yeah. What if Bali just sounds like too much hard work now?
Well, the sources wisely provide some excellent Indonesian alternatives for the crowd-averse listener, someone who seeks the magic of the archipelago, but maybe without the sheer density of Bali right now.
Okay, so if your primary goal is just avoiding the masses, where do the sources suggest looking?
The top recommendation is often Lombok, Bali's neighbor to the east,
Why Lombok specifically?
because it has significantly fewer tourists than Bali. It offers a similar mix of spectacular beaches, good surf, and volcanic scenery. Mount Rinjani is incredible, but it has a predominantly Sasak and Muslim culture, which provides a different, perhaps slower-paced, cultural context.
Interesting. What if your main interest is underwater? Diving, snorkeling?
Then the Gili Islands, which are technically part of Lombok but have their own vibe, are usually recommended, particularly Gili Trawangan if you want some social life, or Gili Air and Gili Mano if you want real quiet. They're famous specifically for diving and snorkeling in clear waters.
And they have that small island, no cars charm.
Exactly, that car-free bicycle and horse cart charm that, frankly, Penglipuran definitely lacks now.
Okay, what about wildlife? If seeing unique animals is the priority.
Then the recommendation is usually Flores. This much larger, more rugged island is the main gateway to Komodo National Park for seeing the incredible Komodo dragons.
Wow.
Flores itself offers really rugged landscapes, strong Catholic cultural influences, which is different again, and generally a much more frontier or adventurous feel compared to the highly developed infrastructure of Bali.
And finally, what about for someone seeking really deep local tradition, maybe an anthropological interest, away from the Balinese cultural context entirely?
For that, the sources suggest Sumba. This is often called the Forgotten Island of Indonesia.
Why?
It's characterized by its unique Marapu animist culture, which is incredibly distinct. You see preserved megalithic tombs, traditional villages with these amazing steep-roofed adat houses. It's a place where tradition feels less mediated by tourism, offering an extremely deep dive into a very different part of Indonesian heritage.
Okay, so the message is clear. If the downside equation of Bali in 2026 doesn't quite work for you, the sources show the Indonesian archipelago is incredibly vast and diverse. There are definitely authentic, less crowded paths to pursue.
Absolutely. Bali isn't the only option, even if it gets most of the attention. So, okay, after this deep dive, looking at the 6.5 million visitors, the rising prices, that crucial cultural contract of respect, the paradox of gentrification, what does this all really mean for you, the traveler? Maybe planning a trip for 2026. What's the final, honest verdict? Is it thumbs up or thumbs down?
My take, synthesizing all these sources, is that the verdict is ultimately positive, but it's sharply conditional, extremely conditional. Meaning, Bali is still worth it in 2026, yes, but probably only for the prepared traveler, the informed traveler.
Okay.
It's worth it provided you, the traveler, actively seek out tradition, natural beauty, and genuine immersion. And crucially, consciously plan your itinerary outside the main, overwhelmed tourist bubbles of South Bali, particularly Seminyak and Canggu, for at least part of your trip.
I think that's fair. The adventure seekers, the culturally curious, those willing to make the effort to maybe engage with the Banjar system or learn a few basic Indonesian phrases, they will still find incredible magic.
Infinitely.
But the average tourist who just relies solely on maybe guidebooks from 5 years ago or just follows the Instagram hotspots without context, they are likely to encounter overcrowding, high costs, and potentially feel quite disconnected from the real Bali.
And value-wise, you just have to acknowledge, don't you, that costs are rising significantly in those premier locations. It's not the budget paradise it might have been a decade ago.
Not in those specific spots, no.
So this leads us directly to the actionable takeaways, the practical advice derived from the collective experience in these sources. What should people actually do?
Okay, first, plan your own pace
Yeah.
and be prepared to move slowly. Don't try to cram too much in and rush through the inevitable traffic jams. Build in buffer time.
Good advice.
Second, use local guides whenever possible, especially for cultural experiences or exploring off-the-beaten-path areas. They are the best way to bridge that gap between the tourist bubbles and authentic community life. Plus, it ensures your money goes more directly into local hands.
Makes sense.
Third, be a responsible guest and, frankly, a responsible citizen of the world. Actively avoid single-use plastics. Bring your reusable bottle, your own shopping bag. Help address that huge environmental strain we discussed. Every little bit genuinely helps when you multiply it by millions.
And most importantly,
fundamentally, respect customs. Remember that clear message from Ketut and the local community perspective. You are a guest in a spiritual home. Dress modestly when visiting temples or villages. Learn basic customs. Be polite. Ask before taking photos of people.
it seems so basic, but it clearly needs repeating. And the ultimate reminder from all this seems to be
That the real Bali isn't always or even often what is seen on social media. That perfectly curated, idealized version presented on the gram.
where's it found then?
It's more likely found in the smaller villages, in the quiet rice paddies away from the main paved roads, maybe helping with a local project, and definitely in the everyday, persistent, beautiful rituals of the Balinese people themselves.
Okay, now to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought, something based on our source material that points directly to the future tensions. The sources note that despite all these increasing concerns about overtourism, the traffic, the waste, the calls from some groups for a moratorium on new large-scale development, the Kimpton Bali Ubud, a luxury international hotel brand, is still set to open its doors in 2026.
Right, in Ubud, the area already struggling to maintain its cultural soul under commercial pressure.
Exactly. This signals continued. Massive investment in luxury tourism expansion happening right now, despite the existing strains.
So the challenging question this raises for you, the listener, to maybe mull over is this. Can Bali successfully preserve its incredibly delicate spiritual and environmental identity when facing this kind of continuous massive investment in luxury tourism expansion?
And maybe even more fundamentally, if that unique spiritual identity is eventually lost or significantly diluted, what is truly left to draw the next 6.5 million visitors beyond just nice beaches, which you can find elsewhere?
That's a debate, I think, that will define Bali's future for years, probably decades to come.
Indeed. Thank you for diving deep with us today. We hope this gave you the clarity and the facts you need to plan your own adventure, whether that ends up being to Ubud or maybe Nanyang Beach or perhaps even Sumba instead.
Until next time, travel wisely and travel respectfully.